Welcome everybody to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I'm Chris Braitch, and today I have the great honour of being joined by Nicky Shaw. Nikki is a qualified and experienced teacher, trainer, lecturer and consultant with over 30 years of professional experience in education and care. She brings a wealth of expertise to supporting children and young people's well-being with a focus on emotional intelligence, empathic interactions and compassionate care. Nikki's passion for emotional well-being extends to her leadership and advisory roles. She leads the Scottish Emotion Coaching Interest Group and was a contributing writer for Realising the Ambition, the National Practice Guidance for Early Years Professionals in Scotland. She is a practitioner trainer for Emotion Coaching UK and was an interviewer for the recent Emotion Coaching Early Years Research Project. Welcome, Nikki.
Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for inviting me along today. I'm delighted to be part of this.
Yeah, I've been really excited about this opportunity to talk to you. We connected maybe 7 months ago now, via the wonderful Suzanne Zeedyk, who does an awful lot in Scotland for ACEs awareness and developmental psychology and trauma-informed schools, etc. So she put us together. We had a great connection around the name Seen and Heard. And then, it's been a lovely conversation since then.
Absolutely, yeah. As you say, it was. I saw the terminology "seen and heard" when I was looking at a post that Suzanne Zeedyk had put on Twitter, and I very much subscribe to the work of Dan Siegel, and he talks about the 4 S's, which is seen, safe, soothed, and secure. So when I saw the term "seen and heard," I thought, oh, this sounds like this might be my cup of tea. And when I then looked at your page, I was blown away by what you were doing, actually. I know how important it is.
Well, thank you very much. And it's been really enjoyable to expand, as we've spoken and shared emails and things around our vision for what education in those sort of terms or developing young people might be. And we'll get into that today. Very excited to talk about that. But I'd love to start any conversation by knowing a little bit more about someone and where they came from. So I'd love to hear a bit about your personal journeys when you were younger, your family growing up. How was that for you?
Well, first of all, you'll hear from the accent. I'm up here in Scotland, so born in Glasgow, born in the 1970s. I was the third of 5 children. So I'll just say it right now, I was the difficult middle child. And that is the terminology that was used. I remember being told I was difficult. And you carry that, don't you? If everyone tells you you're difficult, then you must be. I have new understandings of that now. But yeah, so I was the third child with 2 elder siblings who are 2 years and 3 years older than me. I came from a Catholic family, very, very strict Catholic family. And my mum and dad were, on one hand, these lovely, loving, soft parents who, on one hand, you always felt were there. And then on the other hand, they were phenomenally strict in the Catholic religion. And so, as a child, you just accept what that is. But as an adult, I can look back and see there was this very strange contradiction in the way we were raised. My dad owned his own alarm business. And of course, lots of places get broken into at night. The alarms go off and my dad would have to head out in the van. So my dad felt quite absent in that he worked 24/7. And when he was home, he would be in his wee office working away, doing quotes and things. My mum was an orchestral musician. She played the violin and she travelled Europe as a violinist with the orchestra. And again, that's like a 24/7. Sometimes she was home a lot and then other times you didn't see her, and she worked evenings and she worked weekends. So they were hard workers, but there were long periods of time that I know they weren't around. My mum does say when I was a baby, I was taken in like my dad's workie van, round on the alarm business when she was away. But ultimately, they got a lady to come and kind of, I want to say housekeeper, but I mean, it wasn't a big house. We were in like a 2-bed semi, but they needed somebody present. So I suppose nowadays we might call it a childminder or a nanny, but she was there. I actually don't even know if she stayed over, but she was there. I remember her. She had a cleaner's house coat that she wore. And I have a really clear kind of memory that was my person who cared for me. And my mum and dad have said that she was really there for me, even more than my brother and sister. She was employed kind of to look after me. And then one day she just wasn't there anymore. And that actually tracks through my life. Things that were put in place that just suddenly were gone, with no transition and no emotional support around things. So yeah, so this lady was my carer, and then one day she wasn't. Mum was my carer, and then regularly she wasn't. I lived in a lovely area in Glasgow. I went to the local playgroup, but that's the next kind of big memory I have, is going to playgroup and being really ill with anxiety. I now call it anxiety. It was separation problems, and I can still remember it because I still get it sometimes nowadays, but this utter full body nausea at the thought that my mum was going to leave me at the playgroup. And of course, then comes the screaming and the shouting and the kicking and the hitting and the name difficult child. I just wanted to be with my mum. I just wanted to be with my mummy. And that is something for me that I'm really, really aware of as an adult. I have a fabulous relationship with my mum. I'm very lucky she's still alive. And when I work with young children, I am so aware that their parents are trusting me with them, and that actually for young children initially, the new adult is seen as a threat because they want to be with their mum and dad. So I really understand that, and the work you're doing, when I think about children being sent away to school, I cannot even begin to imagine, because I was bad enough with the fact that my parents went out to work for long periods of time. It's interesting. It gets right into the bones of who you are when you feel like you're left. I've done a lot of work on that kind of feelings of worthiness, which I reckon I've listened to your other podcast, Chris, and I recognise that comes through in what people are saying, that feeling of not being seen and heard, of not mattering, because other things are more important in life. Interestingly as well, the other side of that was the Catholicism. So when my parents were present, it was heavy on Catholic teaching. So yes, there was love the little children, but there was also be a good girl. Always be good. There was no room for anything that wasn't good. And it was, go to your room until the good girl is ready to come out. But in fact, what they were doing was sending to my room a child who was in distress and wanted to be with them all the time. We were taught to give things up for good grace. So in Catholic teaching, grace is something you kind of earn to get yourself into heaven. That's what I was taught anyway. So things were done for good grace, and what was done was that you kept quiet. You didn't complain, and you said nothing for good grace. And if you complained or had a tantrum or voiced a disagreement, it was seen as being actually a sin. So I desperately wanted to be with my parents. And when I was with them, they were, there was hugs and there was love. But the love was removed depending on how well you towed the line. Which is really challenging.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nikki. That's so heartfelt. I resonate with what you've said there. The particularly sort of growing up, having, before I went to boarding school at 7, my dad worked an awful lot, and mum was in and out of the house, for different reasons, not for work stuff, emotional health stuff, etc. I just remember that, it was the sort of village of, it takes a village to raise a child, but there was a village of sort of strangers, semi-strangers, sort of family members or people, cleaners, or like people who came to cook meals, childminders, etc. So yeah, I do really resonate with that. It's difficult when all you want is your mum and dad, as you say. So thank you for sharing that part, and also that the good grace, to that sort of safety and reward and connection is predicated on good behaviour, is predicated on being a good girl, keeping quiet, towing the line, and it sounds familiar for many people, I'm sure, out there,
Yes.
particularly in institutions. So,
absolutely. And I do recognise that that's the way my parents were raised. I understand the intergenerational nature of this, nature of this. I do understand that. There was a lot of alcoholism in my parents' childhood. So my parents didn't drink. And I think from their point of view, that was the progress. They had felt they'd broken the cycle by being teetotal, but it almost went to the other extreme of you had to be saintly and perfectionism. So there wasn't alcohol abuse, but there was just this such a high standard in terms of behaviour and emotion, and emotions must not be visible. Which was really hard when the key emotion was a feeling that you wanted to be with them and they weren't there.
Yeah, thank you.
Really difficult.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the emotions not being welcome. I think, speak of young people coming into this world with sort of 360-degree personality, full range of emotions, and then, primary caregivers, parents, society chip little bits off until there's very little left acceptable, and we get sort of, we call that raising and educating children. Ultimately, we're knocking bits off them until they fit a mold. And
I think we'll get into that today, because absolutely. And I should say, being one of 5, that was interesting, because each, we know that the environment and the genetics interact. So it's really interesting when you're one of 5. Each of you has grown up and gone through different developmental stages depending on what stage of life your parents were at. So there's the genetic component of sort of temperament, and then there's this sort of development of personality in line with what you've grown up experiencing. And it's fascinating. My siblings and I are really close and we talk about it a lot, but we are all quite different because we've all got different experiences, So my eldest brother, mum was home the whole time with him. But she had the neuroticism of being a new mum and panicking about everything. And then my sister's the eldest girl, so she's got her own kind of issues. And then there's me, and then there's my younger brother. And then the youngest came 10 years later than the rest of us. And he had a different experience again. So, yeah, and that's something that fascinates me, is that you can come from the same family, grow up in the same house, but the environment is actually still different for you, depending on what your parents are going through.
So true, isn't it? Yeah, I absolutely As someone who's got identical twins, girls, I see that experiment playing out in front of my
Yeah,
eyes as they grow up. Incredibly different people,
yeah,
and it's really for them, a handful of traits and experiences in the environment that have sent them into different directions, and you can see them, you can trace them
yeah.
back. So
I
yeah.
think the age at which things happen. So I myself and my siblings went to it was a local Catholic primary school, but we still had to get a bus. But it was the only kind of Catholic school in the area. But that I remember being weird, that all the children in the street didn't get on this bus, but we got on a bus to go to the Catholic school. And so you went to school. It was the local Catholic, but it was still several miles away. And so it was a real mix of kids, but nobody lived in the street. So there was that. You felt different coming home. And that impacts. So, like my elder brother, he was capable of getting into arguments and fights about that. If there was local kids having a go, my sister would just put her head down and scurry home. And I would be in the background, dragging my school bag behind me, wandering behind. Nobody bothered me. I was the wee one. So we each had different experiences of that. But my parents then decided to send my brother and sister to private school, Catholic private school run by Jesuits in the centre of Glasgow. But I was still at the local school. So again, a shift. My brother went in primary 4 and had the experiences he had. My sister then went in primary 4, but she was the first cohort of females allowed into that school, and they were not welcomed. It was not a good experience for her. My parents held off. They didn't send me until primary 6, and I begged them, begged, like on my knees pleading, don't send me, because I wanted to stay in the local school. But seen and heard was not something in my family. We decided that's what, but I could see my brother and sister were struggling with it. I didn't want to go, but I was sent. But that means I joined in primary 6, so then I was closer to the secondary school transition, going up into the big school where the big scary Jesuits were running it. And I would see my siblings in the school, but we all again had different reactions to it. My brother was quite bolshy, quite cheeky, really funny. He's got a great sense of humour. And he kind of found a way to fit. My sister, again, kept her head down. She is utterly non-confrontational and just was always like, just be the good girl, keep your head down. I was a bit more fiery, difficult, and I didn't get into bother at school at all, but I did argue a lot with my mum and dad about it. I was very, very vocal about not wanting to go. And the old Catholic values would kick in. Give it up for good grace. Not everything in life is meant to be easy. Difficult, good things are always difficult. You're lucky. Other children don't get this experience. In school, the Jesuits would be saying things to us like, your mum and dad are paying for this, so you better step up, kind of thing. And you're being watched. God's always watching you. And this is what he wants you to be doing, so get on with it. You're very lucky. So it's such a weird mix of different things, because it took me a long time to understand what that was all about, because I always thought, I just come from this loving, big Catholic family. But actually you start to see in it abandonment and a lack of worthiness and feeling not seen, feeling not heard. And for me, what that did was it pushed me towards a kind of counterculture. So three critical things happened for me in my early teens. One was my dad's business went bust. And that was massive, because my dad's value was in his business. Like, that's how he valued himself. So my dad had a bit of a breakdown. The business went bust. We were quickly wheeked out of private school. And I remember being furious that it had taken that for them to finally move us when I had cried every night for 3 years saying, please don't send me. That was the first thing. I had also been bullied in the private school, badly bullied, physically by 3 girls, and coming home covered in bruises and nothing was done. But yet they took us out when my dad's business went worse. So it was okay that I was being physically attacked and emotionally devastated by this really severe bullying. But the moment my dad's business went under, oh, that's the reason to pull you out. So that felt like a worthiness issue. And then the third one was that we had got a family dog and I came home one day and my mum had given it away. And that dog was what I came home to every day after being bullied at this horrific school. And it was my dog. And I came home and my mum said, it was just really naughty, Nikki. We just couldn't live with it anymore. So we've given it away. I didn't get to say goodbye. I found out later in life that she had tasked my sister with going through the photo albums and taking out any photos of it. So again, not seen, not heard, brush it under the carpet. Don't show your emotions. Just, say nothing, keep your head down, be a good Catholic girl, and give it all up for good grace. And so I was a really angry teenager. Really angry.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There's 3 huge, devastating blows for a young person, and as you say, that it's the I don't matter in it. It's the things are happening to me, not with me. I'm not part of the decision making. I'm not part of the conversation. I'm sort of just being moved around. And I think a lot of people who went to boarding and independent schools certainly feel that they're slightly commoditized. But also that pressure you spoke about from the school, from home, don't you know how much this is costing us? Don't you know how lucky you are? Don't you know how privileged you are, etc. And it does start to do a number on you. It does a number on you.
And you don't realise it at the time. You think this is normal. So whilst I was very angry about it all, I internalised that as me being difficult and a bad person with behaviour problems. That's how I envisaged myself, because my sister wasn't like that. But my big brother was. So I always thought my big brother's, difficult, then my sister's a pacifist, and then I'm difficult, and then the 2 younger ones, in my teens were a lot younger. I didn't really think about that, but I classed my behaviour as an unacceptable response to life, rather than what I now do as an adult, where I say, no wonder I was like that.
Yeah.
You think, and again, living in the religious background I lived in, you start to see yourself as bad.
Bad. Yeah. It's really that so inherent, that belief. Someone, Piers Cross, who's in the sort of world boarding school world quite a lot, he often talks on his podcast about that you start to beat yourself up because you believe you're inherently bad. So if everyone else is going to beat you up, you might as well start to internalize that. The vicious self-critic, trying to stay safe, trying to strive for perfection, but ultimately you internalize that anger, and it's very difficult. So with this, and thank you so much for sharing that, Nikki, as you moved out into the world and you started to find a life for yourself, how did it shape you towards the work that you now do?
Well, something really special happened, which was my youngest brother was born. So I was at the private school by that point and, really struggling with feeling like I had no voice in my own life. And this baby arrived on the scene, and it was that perfect age where I was growing out of playing with dolls, and suddenly there was this real life baby. And my mum was of that generation where you put a baby down and you let it cry. And I would frequently be in my room, night time, sleeping, and I would hear my wee brother crying in his crib. And I would tiptoe down the stairs because I knew it was naughty. I knew it wasn't allowed. I knew I was going to get into trouble, but I could not bear that baby crying. I couldn't live with it. It was like empathy overload. And I would sneak into the room. He was actually in like our dining room next door to my mum and dad's room. I would sneak in and give him a finger to suck on. And then you would hear my mum's voice, Nikki, are you in there with that baby? Leave him alone. But I couldn't bear that he was left crying. It was heartbreaking. Funny though, because I thought I was being naughty and difficult, and actually now I'm like, oh my God, that was so much empathy I had for him. So I developed this amazing relationship with my little brother, which I'm very lucky I still have. And my mum started to tell people about how I was this amazing big sister. And I would end up, pushing the pram down to the shops, taking him out to the park. And as I got into my teenage years, I started taking him into town with me to the record shops. And yeah, I mean, he's such a cool guy now. And I like to think it's because I took him around all the record shops. But he kind of became like my best buddy. I just loved hanging out with him, and I loved looking after him, loved it, and caring for him. And so it took me a while to realise the link, but I remember then in secondary school being asked what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be a primary teacher. And I do think it's grounded in having that little brother. I got so much satisfaction out of making sure he was okay, out of caring for him. And I cared for him in a way that he had a voice and that I responded to his emotions. And I can see that what I was doing was caring for him in the way that I'd wanted. So I feel like I was really lucky. I got to kind of look after my inner child, but I did it with my brother. So I did the inner child work in my teens without even realising it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's really something, and I've not heard it put that way before. The idea of, something about taking care of something, healing your wounds as you were taking care of something else. I've heard often with people talk about animals, relationships with animals, but you had to have your little brother, so as that part.
Yeah, it was, and I realise it was the same thing with the dog. Thankfully, the brother was never taken away. Unfortunately, the dog was. But it's that unconditional love, and it's attachment. It's attachment. If you have any sort of attachment disorder, then for me, the way forward in that is to actually find secure attachments that nurture you. And I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I know as an adult that's what I was doing. I was all the empathy and understanding and hearing emotions and saying emotions are okay and saying that you understand them, all that stuff I needed. I did that with him. I don't actually know where I learned it from, because it wasn't from my parents. It just felt, it was intrinsic. Like, he's trying and he needs somebody, and he shouldn't be ignored. Nobody taught me that. I just, in my gut, could not lie in my bed and hear that baby crying.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, that's really something. Yeah, the intuition that sadly we sort of train out of people, listening to our intuition. And a lot of when I do coaching work with people, most of what we're doing is getting back to being able to listen to the intuition side of things. But that's amazing. And then as then you sort of came out into work, did it, you said started to think secondary school, right, primary teaching, and then ending up some of the work you're now doing, where you're really sort of coaching and reaching people on maths. What can you talk me through that transition then from sort of primary school teaching, what you took from that, and then what you've brought forward into the work you're doing now?
Absolutely. Well, again, if I just being classed as difficult, I was a really good pupil in school, but a bit bolshy because I'd done the counterculture thing. So I had a leather jacket, I had black hair, I was shaved up the back of the head, I had the earrings. I mean, I was a goth and revelled in the fact I was a goth. And there was a group of other students in school who I would say we ranged from the goths, the punks, and the kind of glam rock kids. There was a gang of us hung out together, you know, and we'd go drinking up the golf course and things. And that's where I found where I belonged. So I still was a really good student in school. I did my work because that had been so ingrained in me. But I did it in a kind of grudging way. And, you know, we would walk down the corridors of school with the leather jackets and the big boots and things. So I got taken in for a guidance meeting and asked what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to be a primary teacher. And the woman laughed herself off her seat. She just laughed and laughed and laughed at me. And I was horrified because I thought, I'm actually a really good person inside, and you're judging me on my black hair and makeup. And I was really annoyed because I just had a feeling I would be a good primary teacher, but she didn't see it in me. So she talked me out of it and told me she didn't think I was the right kind of person for teaching and that I should pick something else. So instead, I went to uni and I did sociology and psychology because I'd got a book. I won the biology school prize. See, I was a good student. I won the biology school prize. I got 99% in my prelim and won the prize. And I bought a book on, it was called Stardust. And it was about how basically we are carbon-based beings and we come from the stars. And I read this book and I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I thought I need to, you know, so I had started reading those kind of books, like, who are we? Where do we come from? Why do we do what we do? So I decided to go and do a psychology degree. And in the process of that degree, I found sociology. And one of the courses I took was sociology of education, because I still hankered after being a primary teacher. And then I did my dissertation on looking at working class disadvantage in secondary schools and the kind of life choices the students are pushed to take in secondary school, depending on what postcode they came from. So I had done that and was still like, this is where I want to go. You know, I thought it might have been knocked out of me, or maybe that teacher was right, but she was wrong. I definitely wanted to be a primary teacher. I applied and I didn't get in for the postgrad. So I took a year and I thought, well, I want to work with children. Where can I work with children if it's not school? Because they're at school all day. So I went into after school care and I became a play leader. Honestly, Chris, if I could have done that for the rest of my life, I would have. I loved that job. Loved it. It was play. It was care. It was fun. You got children after a hard day at school, so you could contain them and empathise with them and kind of settle them before they had to go home. I loved it, but it paid £1.80 an hour, which unfortunately is still quite common in care, that we don't pay people well for professional care. But I did that job, and the head teacher in the school spoke to me one day and said, Nikki, you should be a primary teacher. Finally, somebody had seen it and said, you should be a primary teacher. She said, apply again and I'll back up your application. So I got into Georgian Hill in Glasgow. And if I'm really honest, Chris, I hated it. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was regimented. It was discipline. I don't mean for me, I mean that's what you had to be as a teacher. You had to be in control. Children's voices were not important. It was chalk and talk. I mean, it was in the 90s, so we were still standing at the chalkboard, you know. It was all timetabled. And I remember thinking, now I've switched. Now I'm on the other side. I'm the person telling the children, sit down, listen, behave, stop talking, stop moving. And I really struggled with it. I really struggled. But I did graduate because I thought I've got to see it through. It's only a year. But I knew that the regime of education was not where I wanted to be. So I moved into nursery. I went into nursery education where I found my place. Children's voice, child-led, playful, fun, emotionally regulating, all the things I needed as a kid, all the things that I feel passionate about still, was what was going on in nursery education. And so that's where I ended up, in nursery, for 20 years. And in that 20 years, you know, you're always learning as a professional, but across that 20 years, I started to use what I'd learned in my psychology degree, what I'd learned from all the books I'd read, and I started to kind of really get deep understandings of attachment, of how the brain develops in response to relationships, that whole kind of biology, science of connection. You really see it when you work with 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. You see it play out, and you see how the tiniest moments of interaction can actually build pathways in children's brains. And yeah, that was me, hooked.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see now when we've been speaking before about things like the behaviorist approach, you know, sanction and reward, versus what, you know, you've just described there, child-led play, the voice of the child, understanding attachment and understanding how, you know, micro interactions, because you know, with trauma kind of stuff, it's not what happens, it's what you make it mean. So, you know, the events can be seemingly innocuous or quite minor, but if the child has something they're carrying into it, or a belief is made at that point, it stays, it really sticks around. So it doesn't have to be the big T trauma stuff that people think about. So, you know, with that, you've with the nursery grounding and everything you've gone on to now, can you talk a little bit more about the behaviorist approach that really is still out there, as the norm, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's shifting.
Okay.
It's shifting, but I think it's misunderstood that if you move away from behaviorist approaches, if you move away from sanction and reward and discipline towards emotion regulation, there's this kind of image that it's soft touch, let children do what they want to do and be, you know, behave any way they want to behave. And it's not a soft touch. It is a brain-based approach to working with children. When you understand that it's got teaching at the heart of it, then you can have impact. So what happened for us was I was in a nursery, and we were using sanction and reward because that's what we were all trained to do. But we always said, oh, it's promoting positive behaviour. It's, oh, we focus on the reward. But the reality was, not getting a reward is a sanction. So even if you say, oh, we're rewards based, the giving and not giving of reward is controlled by the adult. There's no child voice in it. And the not getting of the reward is a sanction. So we have to be really open about that. If you say you do promoting positive behaviour, you have to accept that that means you're also doing the negative. So we took a promoting positive behaviour approach, and we thought we were doing a good job. We thought we were developing our children with a moral compass, and that they knew right from wrong, and that they understood if you do this and it's not the right thing, you're going to get into trouble, you're going to have time out, or you're going to have to take time away from play. So we were taking this approach, but we were loving and gentle with it. But still, there was tears and distressed children and upset children, and it was the same children kept getting into trouble, and the same children kept being given time out. And then one day, one of the improvement officers for nursery was in, and she said, look, this new article's been published by Dan Siegel. Okay, so Dr. Dan Siegel. I've mentioned him earlier, who talks about seeing safe, soothed, secure. He'd written an article and it was called Timeouts Are Hurting Your Child. And it was right at the height of Super Nanny being on television and the naughty step.
Yeah.
We didn't do naughty step. We had what we called thinking time, which was if a child misbehaved, we would say to them, come with us, let's go take some thinking time. We were with them. They weren't isolated, but it wasn't a time to talk through. It was just we kind of sat in silence with them. So I read this article, and Timeouts Are Hurting Your Child, and Dan Siegel was saying the pain of isolation registers in the same part of the brain that the pain from being hit registers. It's the same place. It's social pain. And Dan Siegel was saying, basically, when you put a child on timeout and they're isolated, they're not being connected with, they're not being taught because you're not actually interacting, you're building pathways in the brain related to not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, and actually feelings of physical pain. And when we read this, we were horrified, and we thought we were a really loving, caring team. Well, we cuddled the kids all the time, but the children who misbehaved were not getting that. So this article came in and absolutely threw us. And to be honest, as with anybody that questions what you think your values are and what you stand for, there was like anger. We went through the stages of grief. We were angry, we were shocked, we were in denial. And then we really started to say, hold on a minute, what does that actually mean? If that's a scientist saying this. So at that point, I had started a master's in early years. So I decided to make that my focus, to go and investigate the neuroscience of basically what's happening in the brain when we discipline children. And it completely opened up my understanding of my own life, of what I'd experienced in private school, of what I'd experienced with bullying, all of it. It was like, all started to kind of fall into place, because I realised that the pathways in the brain that we develop are built on experiences. And if we have experiences that shut down our emotions, that teach us that certain emotions are bad, then we don't learn how to control those emotions. We only learn how to shut them in. But they're still in, they've not come out, they're still there. And I'm sure a lot of people that have been through really difficult experiences will recognise that. You internalise the negative emotions when you're taught to hide them. And, so myself, I had ended up with irritable bowel syndrome and an anxiety disorder and panic attacks. And I realised, oh my goodness, that's what had happened. I turned that all in on myself, rather than being taught how to express those emotions in a way that was safe. And once I realised, actually, you can build these pathways in the brain that allow that emotion to be felt in a way that is purposeful and helpful, and basically wire your brain up in a way that is kind of focuses on emotion regulation, but emotional understanding, self-compassion, empathy. Once I started to understand that, my whole practice changed, which is what's led me to here today, because I ended up from being a nursery teacher and researching this, and I did research in my own setting around emotion regulation and emotion coaching. From that, I moved up to university and became an early years lecturer, because I just felt we need to get in at the beginning of people's careers. To ensure that teachers, early years educators know this stuff, because I didn't know it for 15 years of my career, and I would have changed completely the way I did everything if I'd known it right at the start.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nikki. Yeah, and then as soon as you mentioned super nanny and letting children
So
cry
you
and naughty step. Because that was my journey. I've had to own that with my children the last few years, and I've just said to them, I got it completely wrong. And when you were young, we used super nanny stuff, we used the naughty step, we used all that. At the time, it was the done thing, and coming from the background that I came from, where it was all sanction and reward based, it made sense. There was a lot of love, again, a lot of cuddles, a lot of good things. I was always present, but I know that they have carried that lack
yeah,
of confidence, self-worth, etc., because of those early interactions and because of other stuff, generational trauma, genetic bits, and it is quite a thing to see it, own it and try and unravel it, which is something we're working through. But yeah, from the lecturing, from all of the experience you built to this point, what what did you form to then take out there to give to professionals? What was it that you sort of took on the road as a story and a
yeah.
narrative?
Well, as I say, we moved from this behaviorist approach, and part of my master's degree was to do a piece of research around this. And so I was looking, as you do your literature review when you're doing a piece of university research, I started all the reading. And my first place was Dan Siegel, because that was the article I'd been given. And from there, I found myself looking at Sue Gerhardt's book, which I noticed someone else in your podcast has mentioned before, Why Love Matters. Such a great book. And that's all about the kind of infant brain and the impact of love on the brain. I found the work of Alfie Kohn, who talks about the negative impact of sanction and reward. I found Rick Hanson's book, which talks about the impact of social connection on the brain. And all of that led me down to the work of John Gottman. And John Gottman is kind of known as the father of emotion coaching. So John Gottman did a study in the 90s, and it was about parenting actually, but he was looking at the interactions of parents with their children, and he ended up kind of identifying these 4 approaches. So emotion disapproving, which was my experience as a child. And I would think for people in boarding school, private school, emotion disapproving would probably, be something people would recognise. And there's a lot of that still, I think, in public life. Very west of Scotland to be emotion disapproving as well. West of Scotland males are, don't show your emotion. The second category was emotion dismissing, which is to say to somebody, stop crying, you're all right. Wipe your tears, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. So it's not disapproving of the emotion, but just quickly get rid of it as quick as we can. Then there's this sort of permissive approach. That's the third category Gottman saw, which was people who wanted to approve of emotion and say emotion were okay, but they let all displays of emotion happen and be acceptable. And I think that's where people mistake an emotion regulation approach as sitting. It doesn't sit in there. But people think if you take sanction and reward away, you're into permissive. But permissive is that there's no boundaries, there's no rules, there's no teaching, there's no expectation. The fourth category was emotion coaching. And it does as it says on the tin, it's coaching children through their emotions. So it's accepting of emotion, it's teaching emotion, it's teaching how that emotion feels, how to regulate that emotion, and how to express it in a way that's safe. And that's not permissive. That's actually quite hard work. But it's a way to teach people to understand the feelings in the body, and instead of internalize them and turn them in on themselves or externalize them onto other people, you learn to recognize what that feeling is, and you learn to recognize what your body needs when you feel that way. So what it does is it teaches self-soothing. And I'm sure you know this, but one of the pathways to addiction is the inability to self-soothe and to end up using alcohol, drugs, whatever it be, to soothe the pain. So for me, emotion coaching is something that we need to be teaching all our children, because it's the way to manage the big feelings, because we do have big feelings and it's okay that we have them. It's what we do with them. So I trained during my master's, doing my research. I saw it right in front of my eyes with 2, 3, 4-year-old children who started to learn what these emotions were, what these feelings were, and what they could do with them. And so from that, I just thought this needs to come out from my tiny little nursery. And there was a team in Bath who had been doing some research with additional support needs schools and secondary schools, and they had opened, they had set up their business, Emotion Coaching UK. So I just contacted them. I was a wee bit gallus, and I just contacted them and said, I've done this bit of research and I'm wondering if I can speak to you about it. And so Janet Rose, I'm going to name check them because they're amazing. So it was Janet Rose, Lisette Gus, and Louise Gilbert. And they got in touch with me when I contacted them. They said, nobody's done this in a nursery class yet. This is amazing. And they invited me down to the Attachment Aware conference in Birmingham. And there was me, a wee nursery teacher from north of Glasgow. You know, I'd gone 10 minutes to work every day and back, and suddenly I was on a flight to Birmingham to a conference of these attachment researchers. It was quite an experience. But yeah, so I started to kind of connect with Emotion Coaching UK, and then they offered me the chance to become one of their practitioner trainers. So I did my accreditation. I'm still accredited with them, and that was it. That's when I was like, I need to take this out on the road. But the next step was I went up to the university. A job came up at the university for an early years lecturer, and I thought, well, that's the way in to actually get people at the start of their career and put that in place. And so that's what I did. I joined Strathclyde University and I started to do lectures on this stuff. And it's that, I think, what people have said was the reason they worked was because I had the practice background, but I'd done the theory bit as part of my master's. So it's that theory practice link really seemed to connect with people. And then last year I decided I'm going to go wider. I'm not going to just save it for university students. Lots of people can't afford to go to university. So I set up my own business and I go out and I do professional training. I go and I work in schools, nurseries with childminders. I've recently been working with further education staff, looking at how to support people with emotion coaching.
Incredible journey, Nikki. Thank you so much. I'm gripped by it, but I think, as you say, it's that combination of lived experience, of practice, of working in the environments, and then adding on, starting really early on with the psychology and sociology, then adding on emotion coaching and everything that followed, and the masters and the etc. But it's as you're bringing this out now into the world so much more via your company and via the university previously. What are you seeing as far as take up? Who's doing it? Who's doing it well? And what are the pushbacks for those who are, kind of see this as maybe a bit out there, a bit soft touch or whatever it is that you mentioned?
Well, it's interesting because I've got the theory practice link. I think if I just was doing theory, you might get more pushback. But because I'm able to talk about what worked in practice and take examples, what I'm finding is that practitioners who come and do training with me are like really empowered to go and try things. And often in training, what I'll do is we'll look at some of the theory, we'll look at my own practice experience, and then we'll take kind of practice examples from people's own experience. And we'll use an emotion coaching approach to work out how it could have been done or what we could do. And when you do that and people see the actual steps in the process of how to interact with a child in distress, you see the light bulb moment. You see people saying, that would work. I can see how that's going to work. And I regularly get emails from people saying it's changed everything. The way the children respond, they're so much happier, they're much calmer. So it has impact. So I don't feel for myself when I do training, the people that come to the training, I don't feel a lot of pushback. I suppose it's getting in the door, isn't it? That have people say, okay, we do want to learn about this stuff.
So it's an awareness piece as much as anything else, rather than, there's a lot of awareness, but there's a lot of resistance. Actually, there's just not a lot of awareness that this is here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it also depends on the sector you work in. So, working with early years people who work with children birth to 5, I've worked with enough of them now to know they have this instinct for caring. And I'm not saying people further up the school don't, but it's there in abundance in early years staff, which is why I called my business Nicky Shaw Care and Learning, because if you don't have the care, the learning doesn't come, because the brain is stressed. So when I work with people working with young children, they're kind of on board and saying, this is what we always believed, but we've now got the theory behind it. In schools, sometimes the pushback might be, we don't have time for this. And I say, okay, well, how long does it take you every day? How much of your day do you spend using sanctions? How much of your day do you spend telling that child, stop talking, stop shouting, stop running in the corridor? How long do you spend after playtime every day in conflict resolution with children? Take all of that time, add it all up. You cannot tell me that is quicker than actually putting in this work on emotion coaching, because the more you do it, you build the pathways in the brain, and then children can do it for themselves. So it's not just, I need to do these 5 steps every time. It's not that. It's actually teaching about emotion. We think it's intrinsic, but we need to teach children, when you feel that way, this is what it means. This is why this has happened to you. And here's some things you could try, like deep breathing, or going for a drink of water, or taking a big shrug, or, kind of really simple techniques. And when you teach it and you do it over and over again and it becomes habit, then you have really well-regulated children. So you're actually not having to spend lots of time on emotion coaching, because they got the skill. So there's that aspect of it. And I think that's the bit, trying to get that across to people, that this is part of teaching. It's not an add-on. It's not a soft touch. And it shouldn't be seen as a sidebar to numeracy and literacy. If we do this, if we take this approach where we focus on the social emotional brain, the other stuff all falls into place.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that for me encapsulates everything. The resistance and pushback, seen and heard. We've had going into schools talking about emotion coaching and the introduction of emotional intelligence and literacy, or compassionate leaders of the future programs, or any of this cool stuff. That sounds lovely, but how are we going to wedge that into a 9-hour school day in some of these private schools that is timetabled to death from start to finish, and there's extra this, and there's flute, and then there's rugby, and then there's da-da-da-da. And I would say more is not more, less is more. Stressed minds can't learn. Stress plus rest equals growth. Stress plus stress equals burnout. You can use all these things, but still it doesn't quite land. It's either there's no money or there's no time. I can't spare the teachers to go on the training, because how will I cover them? Da, da, da. So there seems to be, so far in our experience, a fairly long list of reasons why this is not a good idea, or why it can't happen, rather.
Yeah, I have a very definite thought on that, which is that we need to revisit the purpose of education. Because if education is about preparing for life, I'm not saying it is, but if that's one of the things people think, then life is about being human. So to me, if education's preparing for life, then the core skill is how well do you get on with other people? You know, that's more important than can you count to 10 almost. Then if it's about understanding your place on the planet, then that also is about how you relate to living beings and other people, and how you care and what compassion you have for other living beings. If it's about opening doors to opportunities and empowering people, then to open doors and empower people, you need to give people voice, and you need to give people kind of self-confidence and self-regulation skills. So I can't find any purpose for education where this shouldn't be the first thing. I just can't see any way. And it's something I struggled with as a teacher. The utter humdrum, drive for literacy, numeracy. And I could see children just shriveling under that, who needed, the social emotional learning stuff. Aristotle said it. He said, if you educate the mind without educating the heart, it's not education. And if we look at all the things going on in the planet, and the world's tricky at the moment. What are we looking at? We're looking at, growing people who don't know how to regulate themselves are running our world at the moment. We need to revisit, why are we sending people to school? First of all, is school the right way? And if it is, what is it we're doing in schools? Because if it continues to be a factory process of churning out people with grades and people falling away from that don't come out with the grades, who then feel like they're nothing, we're not going to improve society. I just think as a society, we created education and I don't think we're getting the best out of it.
No. As you know, I resonate very deeply. Yeah, with that. I think we chatted a little bit before we started about the move from IQ to EQ as being the sort of most, or emotional intelligence being the most valuable asset.
Yeah.
And if you look at any of the leadership studies, any of the Harvard Business Review leadership studies, any of the thinking, the literature out there, the EQ is a much bigger determinant of lifetime success, achievement, happiness, whatever you want to call it. So if the system is trying to knock out lots of people to create GDP for the country, it will be served much better if they come out with more EQ, because that is the skill that's needed. And with AI coming through, how much literacy and numeracy is enough when so much, as you said before, these young people in schools now will have jobs that we don't even know exist.
Yeah.
So they need to be given socio-cultural skills, communication skills, emotional regulation, EQ.
We are social beings. That is what makes us phenomenal as a species. We are social beings, but it's almost like we've tried to move away from that and say that IQ matters more, when in fact we know, in terms of, a well-lived life, actually it's your relationships and your connections and your community that influence whether you feel you've lived a good life. But we don't teach that in school.
No.
We teach competitiveness and, IQ. So yeah, my values are, if we focus on EQ, if we focus on why we have emotion, recognizing it's a communication, and responding to it in a way that is safe and supportive, that allows people to feel seen and heard, then we will have children who feel safe enough to learn. So the outcomes, for those that passionately feel, we need to still have exam systems and good academic outcomes, okay, but to get that, you're actually better focusing on the social emotional brain. That does improve outcomes, but somewhere along the line that's been misunderstood.
I hear you. Nikki, thank you so much. As we start to come to the end of time today, I just wanted to give a last opportunity to, is there anything that you want people to know out there, anything you want people to take away from this that we haven't touched on already?
Well, I suppose I was at a conference this week and I was listening to a fabulous professor, Darcia Narvaez, and she was talking about something called the evolved nest. Right, we've not got into that today, but I was listening to her. What she was talking about was she was looking, her research has looked at animals and the way animals care for their young, and then looking at humans and saying, what have we lost over time that animals have still got right? And that idea, and you said it earlier about it takes a village to raise a child. I really, at the moment where my brain is thinking is this concept of community. How do we build that? In terms of early years, what we're doing is we're taking children in full days into nursery and the parents are away to work. We need to think about that. Schools, how can we set it up in such a way that we're all doing this together? It's just all so siloed, isn't it? And then, for people that have been to boarding school, I just think that's a whole other thing as well. That separation from the nest, separation from the family, and that community. We need to come back to kind of that understanding that we're social beings. That's what I would say for anybody listening, is start to think about what can you do to just build the links across relationships for the children in your care or for yourself.
Thank you, Nikki. Really wonderful final words. And if people are interested in your work and want to get hold of you, how should they best contact you?
I have a website, which is Nicky Shaw Care and Learning. I think it might be www.nickyshawtraining.com. And I've got some of my articles on there. I've got a list of the different trainings that I offer, because I cover all aspects of kind of education, but everything I do is done through that kind of relational social brain. And so you can contact me that way. My email address is on there, my phone number's on there.
Beautiful. Well, we'll pop those in the show notes today. And for any schools, educators, anyone interested out there, Nikki is an incredible provider of this thinking, this emotion coaching out there, and is one of the providers that we advocate at Seen and Heard for going into boarding and independent schools to try and really get this work going. So it's been so cool to speak today, Nikki. I think we could go on more. Nice to have you back. Nice to have you back on in the future, and we can get more into sort of how this is going out there and the changes we're starting to see, etc., as progress goes along. But for today, we'll have to leave it there. Okay. So love to say a big thank you to Nicky Shaw for coming on. A huge thanks to everybody for listening. It's been the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series, and wishing you a fantastic day. But thank you, Nikki, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chris.